Hey guys, welcome to another top 10 list. I already did top 5 favorite Super Nintendo games, but I have to admit, I was kind of in a rush back then. I kinda wanted to give you another top 10 console video games list because I freshly made top 10 favorite PS4 games list, so I impulsively made another top 10 list. But the reason it was a top 5 and not a top 10 is because I couldn't quite think of all my favorite Super Nintendo games. There are so many of them. But this time I'm absolutely sure. So if you want to know my favorite Super Nintendo games list, then this is the list you should check out. Because this time I'm absolutely sure about the video games that are on this list. Admittedly, my top 5 is nearly identical to the top 5 I made back then because it hasn't changed. But there are more games on this list. And also I played one more Super Nintendo game that I haven't played back then that's so amazing and it has to be on this list too. So as I said, if you wanna know my definite favorite Super Nintendo games list, this is the list. The previous list is no longer relevant. This is the list if you want to know my ultimate favorite Super Nintendo games. And by the way, Super Nintendo is one of my favorite, if not the favorite, video game consoles of all time. It has so many amazing games, some of the greatest games ever made. I think many of those lists alone are some of the greatest games ever made. And of course, because this is a Super Nintendo list, I will again talk about my history with Super Nintendo like I talked then. I will tell you, I still own the original Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo that I own is actually older than me.
This is my Super Nintendo, and it's older than me, actually.
Okay, now that you've seen my Super Nintendo, let's get on with the games! Number 10. Asterix. Yeah, this is one of those games I played a lot in my childhood. Yeah, because in my childhood, when I owned Super Nintendo, I admittedly didn't own many games because this Super Nintendo belongs mostly to my father and sister. I was just a very little kid, so admittedly, I didn't play many games. But this is one of the ones I played, and I loved it so much. It's so much fun. I'm a huge fan of Asterix and Obelix comics, by the way, and this game was based on them, and you play as Asterix and you go on a mission to find Obelix while fighting the Romans and all. It's all so much fun. But as I said, this game is not very well known and it's a licensed game. I'm generally not very much into licensed games. Nostalgia largely plays part here. But yeah, it's admittedly one of my favorite Super Nintendo games. Number 9. Super Mario World. Yeah, what type of Nintendo list is complete without any Mario game? And Super Mario World, I would consider the definite Mario game. It's not my favorite Mario game, that goes to Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, the title. But if you want like the objectively best pure Mario game, then definitely this is it. This is the game that perfected the Mario formula from the original NES, upgraded the graphics and everything. So yeah, and also it basically stayed a staple for all the Mario games that came later. So, and this game is a lot of fun. The platforming is fun. Yeah, the level design is great too. And the voice acting is also pretty great. So yeah, I have played this game originally on the Game Boy Advance because as I said, I was very little when I owned Super Nintendo, but I later found it in the old game store for Super Nintendo and had to buy that classic. Number 8. Final Fantasy V. Yeah, I love Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy VII, for example, is amazing, as is Final Fantasy VI, which, spoiler alert, will be higher on this list. But you already know that if you watched my top 5. So yeah, but Final Fantasy V, it's not quite as good as Final Fantasy VI, but it's still a great JRPG. Like, the characters are great, the story isn't bad, but it isn't super good, but the cast of likable characters just keeps it going. and the gameplay is literally one of the best gameplays in the history of Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy V is definitely not the best Final Fantasy, but it's definitely in the top 5. It's a fantastic JRPG. Number 7. Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. So yeah, I talked about how good Super Mario World is, but honestly, I personally think Yoshi's Island's better. Yeah, I love the designs, I love the colorful graphics that literally looked like a drawing of a talented little kid. And I think it also had much better boss battles. And I just loved the uniqueness of playing as Baby Mario and Yoshi and trying to rescue Baby Luigi. So yeah, as good as Super Mario World is, I can't do anything but I just prefer Yoshi's Island. Number 6. The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. Well, yeah, this game is one of those games that's probably number 1 on many people's Super Nintendo list, and rightfully so, because this is objectively an amazing game. And yeah, it's certainly one of the best Zelda games. Like, my personal favorite is Ocarina of Time, but Link to the Past is certainly in the top 5 actually. Like, the story of the game is fantastic, the music's awesome, you play as Link and you have to rescue the world from Ganon, as all the other Zelda games, and it's all pretty amazing. And I also love switching between the normal world and the dark world. And the boss battles are epic too. And best of all, this game also gave birth to an amazing sequel like many years later called Link Between Worlds. I actually think I like Link Between Worlds slightly more, but still, this game owes everything to Link to the Past. And those top 5, those are literally some of my favorite video games of all time, and they're very interchangeable. It's really hard to say the order of them exactly, because as I said, all those top 5 games are literally some of my favorite games of all time. Yeah, I adore all those 5 games, and honestly, the order is very, very interchangeable. So, don't pay much attention if you think the order is wrong, because as I said, they're very interchangeable. Number 5. Super Metroid. Yeah, this game is amazing. Like, you play as Samus and you navigate this alien planet and you're all alone. Yeah, the atmosphere is simply amazing. And the graphics have aged so well on this game too, honestly. And I just love how the claustrophobic feeling of navigating through everything, finding upgrades and backing through, it's all such a rewarding experience. And the art of this game is also amazing. And the story, even though there's almost no dialogue and you just go through, there is actually a story to this game. And the way it's told is pretty creative actually. I love the way that the story is simply created from gameplay, and yet there definitely is a story there too. After so many years, Super Metroid still remains the best Metroid game ever made and one of the best Super Nintendo games ever made. And one of the greatest video games ever made in general. Number 4, and this is the game that I've beaten very recently, because this is one of those games I missed out on a long time ago, and I've beaten it only very recently, and that's Chrono Trigger. Yeah, when I beaten the game, I was surprised by how amazing this game is. Like, the story is fantastic. It's one of the best stories in video game history. And the characters are fantastic. I love Chrono and Marlene and Luca. Yeah, I love all the characters in this game, and I love the creativity of traveling through various time periods, including the end time. And the graphics are great, the music is fantastic. Yeah, everything in this game is so fantastic, honestly. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if someday this game was even higher on this list. But so we'll see how it goes on my next playthroughs of this amazing game. Chrono Trigger truly is one of the best Super Nintendo games and competes as my favorite Super Nintendo JRPG. You will see Although you probably know what the other one is that's higher on this list. Number 3. Super Castlevania 4. Yeah, I've always been a huge fan of the Castlevania franchise. It's one of my favorite video game franchises ever. And my favorite game in the franchise has always been a tie between Symphony of the Night and this game. Yeah, I love the graphics in this game. The boss battles are probably the best boss battles in Super Nintendo history. I also love the music here. And I love playing as Simon Belmont and finding all those different horror monsters like the Mummy, Frankenstein's monster, the bat made out of gold coins, Death, and of course Dracula himself. And as I said, everything in this game is amazing. It's literally, this game and Symphony of the Night are my 2 favorite Castlevania games, which says a lot because there are many amazing Castlevania games. But as I said, Super Castlevania 4 and Symphony of the Night definitely compete for number 1 spot. Number 2, Final Fantasy VI. Yeah, you probably already knew this game was going to be on this list, especially if you've seen my previous version of this list. Plus, when I talked about Final Fantasy V, I kind of spoiled this game is gonna be on this list, and here we are. This game is probably my favorite JRPG in JRPG's history. I mean, Chrono Trigger now is giving it a run for its money, but still, for now, this game still slightly edges it out. And for example, the story of this game I still think is the best story in any video game history. And the characters are also amazing. Like I love Terra and Celeste and Edgar and Sabin and all the others. Yeah, the characters here are also amazing. When you have one of the greatest stories ever and an amazing cast of characters, you know you're in for a good time. And also, Kefka is literally one of the most evil villains in history of villains. And in general, this is my favorite Final Fantasy game and one of my favorite video games in general. Because simply everything about this game is perfect. Everything. And my number 1 favorite Super Nintendo game is, it hasn't changed. It's the Donkey Kong Country trilogy. Yeah, and as already said before, nostalgia plays a very big part here. It's my very first video game of my life. Like I said, I missed out on many Super Nintendo games. Those 3 games are the ones I mostly played when I was a kid, and as I said, those are my very first video games of my life. They got me into gaming. How could they not be here? And also, just like I said, Final Fantasy VI has the best story. Those games likely have the best gameplay ever. Like the platforming is so much fun, as is the navigation of levels. And the level design and the music here is great too. And the characters are a lot of fun. Yeah, but as I said, nostalgia plays a huge part here. No game brings me to my childhood as much as the Donkey Kong Country. And I will also say my favorite of those 3 is the second one, Diddy Kong's Quest. That's my favorite of those 3. But all 3 are fantastic games that bring me to my childhood. Okay guys, so here you have my real favorite Super Nintendo games. Here you have my top 10 favorites, definite favorite Super Nintendo games. Do you own a Super Nintendo? Do you own any other old console? Please let me know in the comments. Tell me your favorite Super Nintendo games. Please subscribe to this channel, press the like button, and I'll talk to you soon in another video. Talk to you soon, bye!